Good morning, everybody. I've had clarification that we are able to webcast now and we are live. So I would like to. Okay. If you are speaking, would you not in the meeting? Would you mind turning on to mute for a moment? Thank you. So we can start the meeting. Thank you very much. So just to let you know that this is the licensing committee, panel. For notification of a temporary events notice under the Licensing Act 2003 for the Camelford Arms 30 to 31 Camelford Street, Brighton. And can I have nominations for the chair, please?
Could I please nominate Councillor Sykes?
Any other nominations?
I'll second Councillor Sykes.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sykes, if you'd like to take over, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sean. Right, a couple of items of procedural business. First of all, are there any declarations of substitutes on the panel today? No. Any declarations of interest or lobbying on the panel today? No from me as well. Okay, there's nothing on the agenda that requires the exclusion of the press and public, and we have the press with us today, so we'll continue on that basis. So this is the panel to consider the notification of a temporary event notice for the Camelford Arms, 3031 Camelford Street, BN2 1TQ. Just requesting a round of introductions first of all, so I'm going to go around my screen. I'm Councillor Ollie Sykes. I'm chairing the panel today. Can we go to Sean and then Alex, please?
Good morning. My name is Sean Hughes. I work for Democratic Services. I'll be clerking the meeting, taking the minutes and taking notes. That take no part in the decision-making process. Thank you.
Alex and Sam.
Thank you. I'm Alex Evans. I'm Senior Licensing Officer and I'll be supporting Sarah.
Thank you, Sam. Then Rebecca.
Councillor Sam Parra. I'm the councillor for Westbourne and Poets Corner. I'm also a member of the licensing committee. I just need to say that I may need to step out for a few minutes at some point as I have an emergency indoors. I will let you know if that is, and I will be back as soon as I can. It should only be a few minutes.
Okay, if that happens, we'll just adjourn for that period. Thanks, thank you, Councillor. Rebecca, then Paul.
Yeah, Rebecca Siddell, legal advisor to the panel.
My name is Paul Nan and I'm a councillor for Wish Ward.
Thank you. Sarah Cornell, then Sarah Booker-Lewis.
Hello, I'm Sarah Cornell and I'm the licensing officer for this application. Just to say that I'm working at home and I have got an 8-month-old puppy in case you can hear any strange noises. He likes to play, so okay. Don't worry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sarah BL, then Mark.
Hello, Sarah Booker-Lewis, local democracy reporter for Brighton and Hove, representing the majority of news media in the city.
Oh.
Yeah, Mark Thorogood, Sussex Police Licensing, and with me I've got Sergeant Mark Redbourne from Licensing as well.
Thank you very much. Edward, then Tony.
Edward Elton, I'm counsel instructed by the objector police.
Thank you. Tony, would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh, sorry. Yes, Tony Groom. I'm head of legal for the Robel Group of companies, which includes Robel Leisure, which is the applicant. We run and operate the Camelford Arms.
Thank you very much. Finally, Alistair, please.
My name's Alistair. I'm a director of Robel Leisure Limited and other companies within the Robel Group. And as Tony said, Robel Leisure operates the Camelford Arms, amongst other pubs in Brighton.
Thank you very much. Okay, introductions completed. When you're speaking, can you please have your mics on and cameras on, please? And when you're not, please turn your cameras off. So, right, we'll go through the process of hearing the 10 notification. So first of all, we're going to go to the licensing officer first of all, then sort of questions from parties, then the police representation, then the applicant representation with questions from respective parties. We'll then do summaries. We'll request any legal advice from our legal officer, and then the panel will withdraw. So that's the order of play today. First of all, for an introduction, I'll go to Sarah Cornell, please.
Hello, sorry, was that me?
Yep.
Hello, everybody. So this is a hearing for a temporary event notice for Camelford Arms for the Pride weekend from the 31st of July to the 3rd of August For further details on the 10, please see from page 13 of the agenda. The 10 was originally received on the 28th of July 2025, and objections from the police and environmental health were received within the time limits. Environmental health have since withdrawn their objection on the 19th of March of this year. So this hearing is just to discuss the police objection and the 10 notification. And you can see the police objection from page 35. If the licensing authority receives an objection notice that is not withdrawn, in the case of a standard 10, it must hold a hearing to consider the objection. As the 10 was received a year in advance of the event, and last year's Pride had not taken place under the new footprint, it was felt that it was appropriate to adjourn the hearing until after Pride 2025 and subsequent debriefs. Included in the appendices to the report are some emails from the licence holder and the police, which have been shared from all parties. So from page 25 of addendum 2 of today's agenda. The licensing committee may decide to allow the licensable activities to go ahead as stated in the notice. If the notice is in connection with licensable activities at licensed premises, the licensing authority may also impose one or more of the existing licence conditions on the 10, insofar as such conditions are not inconsistent with the event, if it considers that it is appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives. If the authority decides to impose conditions, it must give a notice to the premises user, which includes a statement of those conditions, and provide a copy to each relevant party. The licence can be found from page 25 of today's agenda. Alternatively, it can decide that the event would undermine the licensing objectives and should not take place. In this case, the licensing authority must give a counter notice. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. We'll go to sort of questions to that introduction. Any questions from the panel? None from me.
None from me, thanks, Chair.
Okay. Any questions from the police to Sarah Cornell?
No questions.
Any questions from the applicant to Sarah Cornell?
No, no problem.
Okay.
None
Thank you
from
very
me.
much. Thank you. So now we'll go to the representation from the police, please. As a responsible authority.
The history is well known, and I'm not going to rehearse it here. And what you will also know is that the footprint of the Pride event reduced last year. Last year was also the first year in which no premises except the applicant had off sales as part of their 10. In addition to that, last year was the year in which over the Pride weekend 131 crime reports were generated, whereas the year before there were 192 crime reports, and in 2023 there were 193 crime reports. So a significant, just under a third reduction in the number of crime reports over the Pride weekend. And I should say that the Pride weekend balanced against the August bank holiday or the middle August weekends is either multiples of 2 or 3 times a bigger generator of crime reports. The significant factor between the drop from 192 or 193 in the years 2023 and 2024 to last year is that no premises license holder who held a 10 for the Pride event last year had an off sales at 10, except for the Camelford Arms. So simply by taking off sales out of the picture for the extended period of time, of course, off sales are always available to license holders who have that as part of their license during the normal licensing hours. But for that later part of time, after the Pride event itself is finished for the day, the change was no off sales for everywhere except the Camelford Arms, and that dropped by a third in the instances of crime reported to the police. Now that isn't coincidence, that's correlation. The Camelford Arms was the only premises that did have a 10 for off sales last year, and that was due to a misunderstanding over the way that the 10 was sent in and then objected to, and that objection held, but then the licence holder successfully submitted to the Brighton and Hove City Council that because we had held our objection, there no longer was an objection, and we were now out of time to object to it. You have the Camelford Arms positions in respect of the 10 hearing in your agenda. There are some significant, to use a neutral term, there are some significant errors within it that you shouldn't be compelled to try and decide in the ignorance of the knowledge that they are, to use a neutral term, errors. Looking at the Camelford Arms position, they are operating to act in exactly the same way as they have done for 16 years. Never incident or complaint, well, no, not on the premises, and it's not on the premises matters that we are objecting to. We're only objecting to the off sales and the window bar. And it's not right. There's been a change for this year. We objected last year, but because we, in liaison with the licensing authority, held our objection, it was then later decided that we hadn't objected in time. So it's the same position as last year, and it's what's operating across Brighton. It is correct that the Camelford Arms are good operators in accordance with your licensing policy. And as it's set out in the Camelford Arms position, it is right that 10's applications are a light touch process. It's only when there is an objection that the matter comes before you. Otherwise, the 10 is granted if there's no objection. But as you know, there is an objection. There were, in fact, more than 730 10's applications in Brighton. And this is the only one that's been listed for hearing because it's the only one that is persisting in asking for the 10 to cover off sales. None of the others are asking or have asked for a 10 that will cover off sales. So that is the difference. So quite the reverse of singling out one premises. We're seeking to have the same for all of the licensed premises across the Pride weekend. So the ones doing the singling out are the Camelford Arms by being the only ones that are pushing on with their demand to be able to conduct off sales. It is right that you must consider each 10 application on its own merits, and you mustn't aggregate. I don't ask you on behalf of the police not to grant this 10 just because there is the Pride event going on and just because having no off sales has had that massive reduction in the instance of crime in the early hours. And in the early hours, of course, is exactly when there are the fewest number of police officers to deal with crimes. We do it because we have objected to that in each case, and we've done it because the evidence is clear. No off sales from every premises except one during the time after Pride has finished for the day has resulted in a drop by a third in the instance of crime. That isn't pulling things out of the air, that is evidence. It shows the effect of not having off sales almost across the board. And of course, it should improve when the final off sales allowed premises is excluded, if that's what you choose to do. In terms of the conclusion to be drawn from the Camelford Arms being good operators, which we agree they are, it's stated that the Brighton and Hove City Council Statement of Licensing Policy says good operators provides good operators with a presumption in favour of granting a 10, unless there is clear and compelling evidence as to why one should not be granted. Well, two things arise from that. Firstly, to use a neutral term, error of the statement there. That's not what your Statement of Licensing Policy says. It's at page 28 of your Statement of Licensing Policy at paragraph 3.5.1. What it actually says is, under the good operator policy, there will be a presumption in favour of granting applications to vary premises licences. And premises licences, of course, are completely different from 10's. And premises licenses all have mandatory conditions, and most, if not all, have premises-specific conditions, whereas a 10 does not. So it is simply not true that there is a presumption in favour of good operators being granted 10s. It's untrue. It is an error at best from the applicant. At worst, it's an attempt to pull the wool.
Apologies, Mr. Elton. I've got a question from Sam. Do you need to adjourn, Sam? No? Okay. You got your hand up there.
Oh, so your own statement of licensing policy doesn't have a presumption in favour of granting this 10. What your licensing policy does say at page 36, under temporary event notices, and your paragraph 5.1, is this: applications for 10s at existing licensed premises, which of course would include Camelford Arms, will not be encouraged where the proposal is simply to extend the existing hours of operation. It's rather different from presumption in favour, and puts a completely different complexion on things when you read on, because it says applications made in the city safety area will be subject to increased scrutiny by police and environmental health. If the police believe that allowing the premises to be used in accordance with the 10 will undermine the licensing objectives, they must issue an objection notice. So the complete reverse of what the applicant told you is the truth. It's absolutely not correct that there's a presumption in favour. In fact, we, for the police, have a duty to object when we consider that the granting of the 10 in the terms sought will undermine the licensing objectives. And we do think it will undermine the licensing objectives, because not having off sales had that 1/3 reduction in crime across the city over the last Pride event. The section 5.1 is set out, in fact, in the applicant's part, but they've misstated the position on 10s. And I'm sure they have a very good explanation as to why they've put something forward that is not the case when citing your policy, but that's rather a matter for them. We object. We do object based not just on proxy sales to minors, but that is an important part of it. No premises can control what happens to alcohol after sale when that is an off sale. That's just common sense. If the alcohol is bought and then taken away from the premises, no premises could possibly have control over what happens to it next. So where there are no off sales, the alcohol stays within the premises, and the premises license holders can control what happens to it. And in the case of the Camelford Arms, since they have an absolute ban on under 18s, everyone can be confident that on sales inside the Camelford Arms will mean alcohol staying inside the Camelford Arms. But it's not just the Camelford Arms, it's every single premises loses control of the alcohol and who drinks it and what happens to it. And it's not just minors, it's also intoxicated people, because if somebody buys more than one drink from a window bar, the premises has lost control over whether one of those drinks goes to an intoxicated person, which of course is a huge breach of the, well, it's a breach of the law, and it's a breach of the licensing objectives. So that's the problem with off sales. And as you know, not having off sales in the post Pride event hours has had a 1/3 reduction in the instance of crime. So it's not an empty, gosh, what if? It's empirically the case that not having off sales resulted in a 1/3 reduction in the instance of crime. And we have not objected to the 10, as you will be aware, in terms of operation inside. We've not objected to the current license where there can be off sales before those after hours. It's the 10 requirement of you that you allow those off sales, that is the outlier and the anomaly and the factor that goes to undermine the licensing objectives of the prevention of crime and disorder and the prevention of public nuisance and the protection of children from harm. It's stated by the applicant that proxy sales have never been an issue at the pub. Well, it's not something that they record. It's not something that the police records. So, of course, if nobody's recording it, then there isn't going to be a record of it having happened. And in terms of proxy sales at the Pride Village Party or Street Party in the last 4 years, the police don't accumulate that data. So, of course, a Freedom of Information request would say that there isn't a record of anyone being charged, cautioned, prosecuted, or convicted. That's not the problem. The problem is not the offence of giving alcohol to a minor that you've bought as a proxy. The problem is the significant risk in an unregulated space in the wider world, not on a licensed premises, of people having potentially multiple drinks that they bought in an off sale in an environment where there is there are a lot of people and a lack of control over who does what with that alcohol once it's been bought. As I say, we don't object to on sales. It's the off sales to which we take exception. Once the alcohol's left the premises, and I'm beginning to repeat myself, everybody has lost control over what happens to it next, and that's the source of the problem. It's said that proxy sales will not mention the police's official objection. Well, I've told you what our objection is. It's not proxy sales in and of itself. It's the fact that, amongst other things, proxy sales undermine the licensing objectives, and that is stated in our objection. And of course, when nobody had any data about what was going to happen at the 2025 Pride event, of course we couldn't put detailed objections in about what was going to happen at the 2026 event. And that's exactly the reason, of course, that you, as a licensing body, delayed this objection hearing until today's date, rather than dealing with it before the 2025 Pride event. We agree with you. But if you were to criticise us for not having put down objections based on 2025, well, then, of course, you'd have to criticise yourselves. And I don't suggest either of us should be criticised for that. The evidence is there. There is clear and compelling evidence that not allowing proxy sales as part of TENS across Brighton and Hove during the Pride event has resulted in that 1/3 reduction. Whilst, of course, you consider each case on its merits, the simple fact is that late at night, when there are the fewest police officers on duty, and drinking has been going on for the longest period of time before it stops, because presumably everybody has to sleep eventually, allowing this outlier of off sales does the reverse of promoting the licensing objectives. It allows an avenue of crime and disorder, public nuisance, and harm to children that not allowing off sales, not allowing the window bar, at a stroke removes. And that is the basis upon which we respectfully object to you issuing this 10 in the terms sought. I can, of course, answer any questions, but Mark Thorogood, being the police officer himself, will perhaps be better placed to answer any questions that anybody has on the material that I have presented to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Elton. We'll go to sort of questions to yourself and Mark Thorogood. First of all, any questions from the panel? Councillor Parrott.
Yeah, so I've quite a couple of questions, really. Can I just check the crime reports that you outlined? Are they specific to alcohol related? How would you break them down further? And also, what were the hours of those crimes? Were they specific hours, or were they over the whole of the Pride weekend? I wasn't quite clear on that. I may have missed that, so apologies if I did. Yeah, that's my first question. Yeah. Also, I'd like to know how many do we know how many premises had TENS licenses with off sales prior to 2025? Yeah, so those are my first couple of questions.
Hi, thank you. With regards to the crime data we provided is a general crime data for the city centre area of Brighton. It covers going west to Montpellier Road, north up to Preston Circus, east along to the Marina, and south, obviously, down onto the seafront. So, you know, because that is like the key kind of area for Brighton during the evenings. So, you know, that covers like our busiest areas. The data I've provided is a 72-hour period between Friday through to Sunday.
Okay.
The crime data isn't broken down by each individual crime type. It's general crime data that the police have had to deal with during those 72 hours of those weekends that I provided.
Okay, so there could have been in that time other crime, shoplifting, etc., that wasn't specifically alcohol related.
That could be the case, but obviously any crime that's occurring is going to take up police time. So,
For sure.
you know,
Understood.
so that's why we're just kind of giving you an overview.
Okay.
Then,
and yeah.
Yeah, so sorry, so regards to 10, so in 2025, based on Pride specific 10s, in 2025, we granted 77. On top of that, a further 19 were submitted and they were either refused because they were submitted too late, so within the 5 working days of the event, so automatically refused. And then 19 of them we objected to, but when we say we objected to, that was a conversation with them and they agreed to withdraw them, so we never needed to come to a panel. And out of those 19, 13 of them was solely based on off sales of alcohol. So when we explained the situation about our concerns regarding off sales, so alcohol being consumed in uncontrollable areas, they agreed with us that there was that risk and agreed to withdraw that element of their application or their application in whole.
So when Mr. Elton presented his facts, one of the things he said was that this was, you know, that this is evidence of off sales working. I mean, this isn't, this is just correlated data. This isn't causative data.
That's correct. I mean, it is just general crime data throughout.
So given that Pride and the way it was managed and where it was held and the vicinity of it was changed significantly in 2025, there's also we could also make the assumption that actually crime was reduced because of the way Pride was managed and run and where it was held and other factors that were put in place.
Yeah, I mean,
that's reasonable.
There's loads of different, obviously, you know, things that you think about and X, Y, and Z, etc. But yeah,
absolutely. So it's not really fair to say that off sales is the reason that crime fell by a third, or roughly a third.
It could have played a part in that, most definitely.
It could have.
Yeah,
understood. But it's not evidence as it was presented.
The two things are true. There was only one TENS giving off sales in those late night times, and
understood.
there is the 1/3 reduction in crime.
For sure,
and as you've heard, every other premises agreed. Forgive me, Councillor.
But they're not necessarily correlated, are they? They're definitely not. We can't say that they're causative. All we can say is that those two facts are presented as being two different facts. Yeah, thank you.
The third fact to bear in mind is that every other licensed premises except the Camelford Arms has accepted.
Sure, I heard you. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm just making the point because you made the point very strongly that these two things were related, and I'm making the point that actually, whilst I agree that it is possible that this did have an impact, we can't say for sure that it isn't. So I just wanted to clear that up and be clear about that.
Yes, it's stopping off one of the causes of crime, disorder, public nuisance, and harm to children. And so, yes, the objection is on the basis of the licensing objectives being undermined by allowing the off sales.
Yeah. What we don't know, of course, is in the 131 crimes, how many crimes were still crimes against, particularly against children, as you say, which is one of the key concerns here. No. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Nam.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Parrott has covered off most of what I would have said about the entitlement to attribute the reduction of crime by a third to the lack of off-sales. Yeah, I mean, that was pretty much the point I was hoping to explore, but Councillor Parrott's done it already, so thank you.
All right, thanks. I'd just like to sort of follow up on that point, just to be clear on numbers. Mark, you said that in 2025 there were 77 10s and 13 were for off sales, and they were withdrawn, and the 19 were withdrawn for other reasons. I mean, so did the other? So there were clearly a number of 10s awarded. Were they for purely for sort of extension of licensable period, or?
Yeah. So for 2025, as we have done for a number of years now, we have supported venues to support their trading hours, and that's across the city during the Pride weekend, because we see the benefit that it has to their businesses, and for some businesses it's what gets them through the winter months. But last year, what we decided to do was to try and reduce the risk of alcohol being consumed in uncontrolled areas late at night, including things like the parks and down on the beach, etc. And so we decided last year that we were going to request venues that they trade as per their licence conditions. And I have to say, for the majority of pubs in the city, that means they've got off sales on their licence, because most of them do have. However, during any extended period, we would support them trading till like 4 o'clock in the morning. But that extended period, it would just be for alcohol consumption inside the venue, because then people have the safety, they've got the safeguards of staff, other people being around them, etc., to try and reduce them becoming victim of crimes, etc.
Okay, thank you. Sam, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, actually, sorry, I just wanted to raise a slightly different point. Thank you for your answer, Mark. But in your experience, and I don't know the answer to this, Pride is obviously a huge event in the city, and it's highly populated, full of lots of people, lots of alcohol, lots of stuff happening. The number of crimes committed to the per head of the number of people attending Pride and being involved in that, is Brighton significantly worse? Is it on par? Is it better? How does it fare, say, compared to Manchester Pride or, Notting Hill Carnival? I know the numbers aren't the same, but in terms of, the kind of number of crimes per head, if that's a kind of, an idea, you'd have more experience of that than me. I just trying to get a feel for, is this a particularly crime-ridden event, or is it, within the bounds?
We're going to try and answer that one. So for a minute.
I don't have the figures, Councillor, and I apologise. I can't give you a specific. I can say that the demand on policing through crime and arrests is much higher over the Pride weekend, which is why we have a significant amount of policing for it. So I can, a typical weekend in Brighton on a Saturday night would probably result in about 10 arrests. I know that in Pride we typically have about 30, 35 arrests.
Yeah.
And we'll have a reasonably high amount of crime reporting as well.
Yeah.
But again, I don't know what those specific figures are.
No, sure. I did look it up and I saw there was about 35 arrests over the weekend, which is, but I guess my question was in terms of as a feel for a big events like this, which obviously, you must factor. I understand the demands on police time, but obviously that is something you would factor into your staffing and rotoring and calendaring, because it's not like you don't know this is happening, a bit like Christmas. So I'm just curious really about how it would say compare to other kind of Pride events or significant other type carnival type events that happen throughout the country, which all police forces obviously have to manage. So that was really my question was, how does Brighton fare in that respect?
I mean, Brighton is the largest Pride event.
Yeah.
I understand that's held. But we unfortunately, us personally don't have the crime data for like Manchester or Birmingham events or London Pride.
Yeah. In terms of the number of arrests, you said there were 35. What were the number of arrests for 24 and 23? Just to compare the number of crimes.
I haven't got those figures, Councillor,
Okay.
and I have to go and check those to get it. I mean, again, anecdotally, it feels similar. So it's
Right.
always a reasonable amount of arrests. So
Yep.
I'm not going to correlate that to specifics around this, but in general demand, it feels about right for an average Pride kind of
Perfect.
weekend.
Okay. Not great, but yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I've got one more question for the police department. I'm just trying to sort of deepen get a bit more of an idea of the sort of the causation argument that you're making. And are you able to quantify the reduction in the TENS related off sales in the area for which you're recording crimes going back to 23, 24? What sort of scale of reduction of off sales did you see in that area?
Well, again, that's quite difficult to say, because during COVID, we had the Business and Planning Bill, and there was a period of time where everybody had automatic off sales of alcohol without having to put a temporary event notice in or make a change to their premises license. For the life of me, I can't remember exactly how many years that went on to, but it kept getting extended. And then it eventually came to an end in March last year. So at the end of March, that automatic presumption of you can have off sales without having to apply for anything came to an end.
Okay. And can I just sort of confirm, and I think it was stated reasonably clearly by Mr. Elton, that it is the licensing police's sort of policy objective for the Pride weekend to limit, as far as possible, off sales from licensed premises in that central area. That's the policy objective.
Yes, it is something that we are definitely aiming for, to stop off sales of alcohol into the early hours of the morning. However, this isn't just about Pride. We have put in objections before for other venues throughout other times of the year that are based down on the seafront, to try and again reduce off sales onto the beach, which is obviously quite an uncontrolled area, and people becoming intoxicated down there, then going into the water, etc., or sexual assaults happening. So yes, this is a big thing for Pride, but this is actually something that we look at year round, and we have objected. And we've had people that have got in contact with us at various times of the year and said, we want to do X, Y, and Z down on the beach and do off sales of alcohol. And when we've raised our concerns, it hasn't materialised in an actual application. Obviously, we can look at all the data that's online with regards to what applications have come in, what's gone to a hearing or everything. But what isn't online is those conversations that we have beforehand that then don't actually make it to an application, so you wouldn't be aware of those. Okay. But it isn't just an exclusive Pride thing. This is the year round. This is us not wanting to, increase alcohol onto the beach.
Understand. Thank you very much. Okay, continuing with questions to the police following their representation. So does the applicant have any questions for the police? Okay, Mr. Groom.
Yes, thank you very much. For my first question is to the police is, you've made a very great play about there was a massive reduction in the amount of crime, and separately you make the point that the Campbellford Arms was the only place to have off sales. The questions from the councillors have very much been looking at the causation there, and these are two facts, I think, but they are not correlated. Let me just ask, how many of those crimes last year that you've reported, that you were talking about, how many of those were related to anything that happened at the Campbellford Arms?
None.
Second question, we've been running. Let me
finish. Sorry, Tony. No crime actually within the Campbellford Arms, or that we have traced back to the Campbellford Arms. But that's not to say that a crime hasn't happened from a customer that may have been in yours, who possibly may have become a victim later on in the city.
Right.
So we've clearly stated that we do not see you as a badly run premises. We have already stated and confirmed that you are a good operator.
Right. So of the crimes that you talked about, the 131 crimes in an area that goes way into Deep Hove to the marina to Falmer, etc., it is possible that somebody might have had a drink at the Camelford Arms and 4 hours later there was a crime involved in Deep Hove and that is related to us. Right. So there were no crimes from last year that were related or could be directly connected with the Camelford Arms. My next question is, we've been running the Camelford Arms since 2010, including every Pride that has been then. How many crimes have been directly related to anything happening at the Camelford Arms at any Pride in the last 16 years?
I would have to go away and look at that data, but I shall
Well,
repeat.
have a guess, Mark.
No, I'm not guessing.
I'll answer the question in a different way. It was somewhat loaded. The point is, when they are off sales, on sales, as you've heard, last year, none from within. Off sales, nobody could ever know. That's the problem with off sales.
I think that's entirely my point, that nobody could know, and therefore for the police to go very heavy and saying there is a massive reduction and the Camelford Arms is the only one with off sales, therefore because it is because we've done this. There has never been an issue about any off sales at the Camelford Arms giving rise to any problem in the 16 years that we've been running it. Is that correct?
No, the answer all I can do is repeat. Nobody knows, and nobody could ever know.
So
including
you
yourself,
you cannot provide any evidence.
It's not pantomime.
You have.
I can only listen to one of you at once.
Sorry, Alice, let me speak. So you have to provide evidence to that crime and disorder is going to be affected by this, and all your evidence is that no one can know.
Is that a question?
Is that your position? That the
submissions now.
Right. I thank you. You know, we appreciate that we're running a bar, and you know we're not bringing in barristers externally to specialise in cross-examination. I'm just trying to get to the point here that you've made two statements. There's been a massive reduction in crime, that we were the only people with off sales, and you're trying to correlate those. You're not expressly correlating it, and when questioned, you're backing down from that. But you are confirming, are you not, question, that there is no evidence that you can provide that is relating any of these crimes across the whole of Brighton and Hove, a very wide area, to anything to do with off sales at the Camelford Arms.
I'm sorry, I thought you said just opened your introduction by saying you were the head of legal. So I apologise if I've misunderstood that. No, all I can do is repeat the same answer. It's impossible for anyone ever to tell. What we do know is no other premises had off sales as part of their 10 last year. And there is that huge reduction in the crime statistic.
But there is no causational link, is there?
As I say, and this is the fourth time now in our direct answer to your direct questions, nobody can ever say, because once there is an off sale, the premises itself has completely lost control of what happens to that alcohol in the way that you haven't when it's an on sale.
We'll come on to, when we talk about this, we'll come on to the evidential requirements of this, but I just want to confirm that the police's position is that the best evidence they can provide is that they can't provide any evidence because nobody can know.
Of course, you're framing that in a partial way, just as you misquoted the policy.
We're going to come on to that one. Right,
that's not what we're saying.
Can I move on to another question now, please? You made a few things about why the 10 was granted last year, and you were saying this was due to a clerical error and it was a mistake, etc. Just to correct on that one, because that wasn't the case at all. There was an issue about that, which we challenged, and we have you know, when our 10 for last year was granted, the email coming from Alex Evans, who's on the call here, and I'm sure he'll chip in if I'm not quoting it, but I am reading out his email directly. It was following internal discussions and legal advice. It would not be proportionate to proceed to a hearing. That is not a clerical error. That is following internal discussions within the council licensing authority, discussing all of these matters and taking legal advice. So for you to present that as a clerical error is misleading. Would you agree?
No. Mr. Thorogood
How
can
it,
give you.
how
Am I
is
allowed to answer or
following
not?
internal discussions and legal
Am I allowed
advice,
to
we
answer?
consider this is not proportionate to
No.
proceed with the hearing? How is
Not allowed
that
to answer.
not?
All right.
How is that? How can you describe that as a clerical error? It is a deliberate, considered decision by the senior officers within the council's licensing department. It is not a clerical error.
Again, that's not a question.
It's
You
not a
talked over me
clerical
when
error,
you're
is it?
still talking over me when I'm trying to answer.
Well, you talked over him.
Sorry, can we remain cordial, please?
Okay.
And can I suggest that I think we're possibly straying into your own representation, Mr. Groom. I think the point that you've just made has been understood, and you know, if the police wish to respond to that, then I'll let them respond. So, but maybe no further response is forthcoming. I'm not sure. Do you have any further questions that are not part of your representation?
I do have one point. A lot of this conversation has all been about off sales. Yeah, in our conversations and our meeting with the police 4 weeks ago, our team's meeting with the police, the concern there was all about proxy sales. It wasn't really about off sales at all. It was about proxy sales. The first we ever heard about any of the real grounds for objection from the police was when we were told, we were told in April this year from Sarah Cornell that the police's objection primarily relates to proxy sales. Now, proxy sales is very important here, and it's been important in all of the discussions which we've had leading up to this, and then all of a sudden proxy sales seems to have been dropped as an issue for reasons which we'll come across in our presentation. Proxy sales seem to have been dropped, and it's all about off sales now, and this is moving the goalposts here. And I just want to know why proxy sales haven't been, why we were told that proxy sales was their primary concern, and yet all the time in the presentation so far, it's all about off sales.
Would you like to answer, Mark or Lewis?
I can answer. Everybody knows that the Camelford Arms doesn't allow under 18s onto the premises. They've been very clear about that. We agree that that is the position. So there can't be proxy sales to underage people in terms of on sales, where the alcohol stays inside the premises and only 18s and over are allowed. You can't have a proxy sale to an under 18, to a child. It can only ever apply to off sales, where the premises is abiding by its own no under 18s rule. So it's rather than complete the reverse of changing horses midstream, it's the same point. Off sales, control over the alcohol and what happens to it is terminated the moment the sale is complete. And that includes the possibility of a sale of alcohol to somebody who is not intoxicated and can lawfully buy the alcohol, but more than one person consuming that, which is out with the control of the premises itself because it's an off sale. So it's not two different points, it's the same point. And my instructions are that at that meeting, there were considerable efforts to explain to you the point about proxy sales and off sales, but you seemed resistant to accepting what the police were trying to help you understand.
We were.
I don't know, Mark, if you had anything to add to that response. Before you, if you wouldn't mind, just make sure that somebody who was party to that can add anything if he wants to, and then I promise I won't speak until asked another question.
Right.
Yeah, there's been a couple of
Mark.
occasions where obviously we've had to explain to yourselves the difference between on and off sales. That includes also last year over the 2025 Pride 10 in a conversation I had with you, Alistair, on the phone. The other thing as well is that we've been open at all times with the council with regards to off sales of alcohol and our objection to that element of it in many email communications, which you've had sight of. So you have been fully aware of our stance on this from the very beginning, and it's a stance that rolls over from all the conversations we had with you last year over the 2025 10.
Right. Well, can I just comment on Mark? We've been running venues for 16 years. We do understand the difference between an on-sale and an off-sale. Moving onwards, because I'm just wanting to establish fact, and then because this will come into my point, but I just need to clarify your position that you're making. A further area where you were saying is that you've been seeking to stop off sales on all the premises. You're seeking to have the same conditions for all the premises that have applied for a 10. Is that the police's position concerning off sales? That is your position, is it? My question, that you are looking to have the same conditions for all premises.
Yes, we are looking to reduce off sales of alcohol into the early hours of the morning.
Thank you. Very clear. Thank you. Alistair.
So if you're concerned so much about off sales, what steps have you taken to stop off sales from off licenses and supermarkets who, by quantum and volume, have more off sales than we do? Or even if everybody in the Kemp Town area had off sales, those supermarkets, those off licenses would still sell more.
The short answer is I'm going to have to defer the second part of that to Mark Thorogood, because he'll have the detail on it. The first point is it's not an objection, and I had hoped we'd made this clear. Fault lies with me, not with anyone else. It's not off. You have a premises license allowing for off sales. We're not trying to affect that during your normal licensed hours. It's only the 10s, not just for you, but across Brighton and Hove. Only the 10s for the Pride weekend, in which the police are seeking to curtail the off sales for the reasons I've put forward, probably at least enough times for everyone to grasp.
So are you saying that the police are seeking to control a citywide event by controlling temporary event notices?
I didn't say that, and I didn't try to say that. No.
Well, what are you saying then? Because it seems to me, by all of your aggregation of nobody is a blanket no off sales rule, which Mark also, Thorogood also touched upon, if that is not trying to control a citywide event, what is it?
The police position is that whilst, of course, we're not trying to affect anybody's off sales during their normal licensing hours, is that the 10s hours over the Pride weekend are into the small hours, up to 4 o'clock in the morning, when police numbers are at their smallest, intoxication levels across the board, not everybody, but intoxication levels will be at their highest because people will have been drinking for longer the further you go through the day and into the night. It is the opposite of promoting the licensing objectives to encourage off sales where nobody has control over what happens to the alcohol. That's our position.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Have you established from your crime figures and the reduction therein that they all occurred late at night at 4 o'clock in the morning? That or not?
Councillor Parrott asked a broadly similar question.
So there's no.
Am I allowed to finish the no? No.
Well, we can make a point. I mean,
no, I haven't.
Okay, we'll make it then.
It works much better if you ask a question, I don't interrupt, and then I answer it and you don't interrupt, because of course you can ask another question if you want to.
Also, it's much better if you're not patronising.
Can you please, one at a time, please, Mr. Elton.
I have now completely forgotten what the question was.
I think it's about the relation to the crime statistics,
right,
in relation to offset.
Yes, thank you. And no, Councillor Parrott asked a very similar question, and we answered it and said, no, we're not saying that it is all during the 10s hours.
So what is the link between the evidence that you are presenting that curtailing or seeking control a wider event by not allowing off sales and your case that crime is reduced because of that? What is the link?
We're not trying to control the event, and it is I respectfully suggest, since it's the third time you've said that, you're deliberately trying to mischaracterize the police position, which is unhelpful. What we are saying is in the police's view, as a statutory objector, that it is not in furtherance of the licensing objectives to have alcohol off sales during the post-licensed hours into the early hours of the morning, when there are the fewest police officers to deal with it, and no control over who has access to that alcohol, whether it's sober people of above 18 years of age, whether it's children, whether it's intoxicated people. Because one of the problems, and Mark Thorogood has already mentioned this, one of the problems is that people can become victims of crime because they're intoxicated and they're allowed or they have access to alcohol they wouldn't have inside a licensed premises because there's been an off sale and they've had access to that off-sold alcohol.
So, okay, why are there less police late at night when you think there is going to be more crime? That doesn't seem to fit logic.
That's not what I said.
It's a question.
Right.
Anybody from the police can answer. It doesn't have to be you.
It's not what I said.
Mr.
It's
McKinnon,
not that there are fewer police because
It's
there
a
are more
question.
people.
You made the point, you made the specific point that crime happens later at night when there are less police officers on duty. My question was, why are there less police officers on duty late at night if that's when you think there's going to be more crime? Which is a question.
We're not saying that there's going to be more crime. That's something that you have added. I'll leave the response about why the police numbers are such as they are to the police officers.
I'm not sure if that's a question which is relevant to the consideration of a temporary event notice, to be honest. But I mean, if you would like to answer that, then.
Well, sorry, Councillor. The reason I brought it up is because we're trying to establish here whether we have off sales up until when we close, for instance, has any relation to crime that's committed in the wee small hours. And as far as I can see it, there is no link, which comes back specifically to the Camelford Arms, which, as I understand it, is all the panel can consider. It's not about a blanket-wide policy on controlling pride through the use of temporary event notices or denying them. It is about the Camelford Arms, which has got an unblemished track record of running Pride in exactly the same way for the last 16 years versus conflated statistics that don't make the point that you're seeking to make, as Councillor Parrott said.
Mark, do you want to answer the point about sort of operational decisions between the hours of 1 and 4 in the morning?
Councillor, I think most people already understand where the police sit on this. The demand for the policing is predominantly in the afternoon and through to the evening and late into the night. There is a significant resource on Pride. We simply wouldn't be able to maintain policing levels throughout the night to the morning. So we absolutely have to do whatever we can to reduce the impact on the demand that we are likely to see through that nighttime period. Yes, I would love to put lots of police officers throughout the whole of Pride, for the whole weekend, but unfortunately that's just an impossibility given the demand and also the other business as usual that takes place over the whole weekend.
Okay, I understand. I think the question's been responded to by the police. Are there any further? Do you have any additional questions that aren't covered in your representation? Okay,
I do.
Go for it.
Can you please tell me, am I correct in understanding that your objection is per your letter on the 29th of July 25, and that still stands? That piece of your official objection is that letter, in which you put across you're objecting on all 4 grounds of the licensing objectives. Are you changing your original objection? And if so, why?
As I said at the beginning, The 10 application came in before Pride 25 had taken place. We have, as I hope we'd made clear, revised our objection in the light of the newer evidence. All licensing decisions are taken proactively, as you will know. It's not a process of looking back, it's a process of looking forwards. As I hope you know, our objections have narrowed in terms of the 10, rather than a blanket objection to it, to the objection to off sales and the window bar. I'd hope that was clear. My apologies if I hadn't made that clear. And given that
you have changed.
I haven't finished. Given that we have concluded that we believe that allowing the premises to be used for off sales and the window bar will undermine the licensing objectives, we have a duty under Brighton Hove's own licensing policy to make the objection that we have made. We have refined it in the light of further facts, but the ones that remain are the ones that remain.
So what is the correlation between our premises for 16 years where we've run it unblemished and an objection in 2026? What's changed?
We objected last year, as I think you know, so it hasn't changed this year.
Well, you didn't object last year because it wasn't effective, was it? It was thrown out by the council.
Well, your own question shows that there was an objection, but as you put it, it was thrown out by the council. So yes,
but it was thrown out by
we did object.
But it was thrown out by the council, having taken legal advice.
I don't demur from that.
So you agree that was the case?
Could I make the point? Because we've had off sales at the Pride event at the Camelford Arms. We've had off sales since 2010, and there's never been an objection ever raised about off sales before. So if you are duty bound to raise it as a concern when you consider it to be a concern, why was this never raised? Let's just keep it neutral from 2010 to 2024. Why was it never raised then? Or is it suddenly in the last 2 years that off sales has become a big problem?
And specifically at the Camelford Arms.
Mark, can you come in there?
Mark is going to answer this, I think.
As we've mentioned before, and we've mentioned today at this hearing, what we are trying to do is protect people from consuming more alcohol when they've had enough or they're too young to. This is to reduce the risk of them consuming this in an uncontrolled area, so the parks or the beaches. We have seen in recent years an increase of incidences occurring on the beach. And so last year we had a look to see what can we do more to try and reduce the changes in crime. Over years, crime statistics are going to change. Different things are going to be happening more regularly. A few years later, they might start dropping off, but something else starts peaking. So as we have seen an increase, we are looking to see how we can reduce that risk into the early hours. And the best way that we can do that in licensing is to promote the licensing objectives and to ask venues into the early hours of the morning that they do it as on sales only. We're not objecting to you trading till 4 a.m. in the morning, as we have done, for a number of years, and as we are doing continually with a number of premises. All we are asking is during your extended hours, which I think for you is from 1 o'clock in the morning till 4 o'clock, and slightly different on the other days, that during that time you just do it on sales so that you're ensuring that your customers are safe.
So are you saying, Mark, that people buy alcohol from us? Are you saying, Mark, that people buy alcohol from the Camelford Arms and walk about 600 yards, if not considerably longer, by the time you can get to the beach, because you can't just walk straight out? They're having to walk for ages before they can consume the alcohol on the beach. Is that what you're saying?
Well, yes,
because surely the chances of that happening are about zero, because they will have consumed the alcohol while they're walking along. if they were going to the beach in the first place, which is not easy to get to from our venue. So
And
if
isn't
you've
it-
got a problem of alcohol being consumed on the beach, why does that trace back to our specific application for a temporary event notice when there's been no trouble for the last 16 years?
And isn't it more likely that if they are drunk and they are on the beach, they're probably sitting around next to a whole load of cans of lager or bottles of vodka or bottles of wine that they bought from a supermarket at a quarter of the price that we're able to sell it at? They're more likely to do that rather than to buy a drink from the Camelford Arms and walk 10 minutes or so with it in their hand and then get drunk on the beach.
I'm going to decline your invitation to speculate, but what Mr. Thorogood said wasn't that they would be committing crime drinking on the beach. He said that the instance of crime had increased on the beach.
But it has to trace back to us.
But how is this connected to the Camelford Arms?
Yeah.
That's the answer. That's the question you're not answering.
To use your hypothesis, Mr. McKinnon-Musson, if they have drunk the alcohol on the way from you through the difficult path, you say, for the 600 yards to the beach, then and they've consumed it, they could still either be the victim of crime or commit a crime on the beach. And what has risen is the instance of crime on the beach.
But what is the continuum is that we've been operating our premises in exactly the same way for 16 years. And suddenly, from this year forward, the consumer, the customer, is going to behave differently. Suddenly, they're going to come and buy gallons of off-sale beer, rush to the beach, not drinking it, waiting until they get there, consume it all, and then go mad. That's just not how life is. Surely.
Respectfully, I agree, because that's not what we said. What I just
what you're
said was,
inferring.
even if they consume it on the way, as you say, gallons or otherwise, once they get to the beach, they might become the victim of crime or they might perpetrate crime. What we have noted, and what has driven your original question was why the change, what has driven the change in our approach is the increase in the instance of crime on the beach.
So why not police the police? The question's the police. If you know where the problem is, Mark, why don't you police the beach rather than restrict us? Because the beach drunk alcohol, we know. I mean, I used to run a nightclub on West Street up for many a year, as you also know. I'm very cognizant of protecting large numbers of young people who are out for a good time. I was on West Street. People ran down West Street, went straight on the beach. That's not the same with the Camelford Arms at all. So if you think that there's a problem on the beach, why don't you police the beach rather than object to our 10?
Respectfully, it's not binary. We can do both.
Well, there's no need, is there? If what we're doing is the same that we've done forever, and by your definition, crime statistics come down by us having off sales, then frankly, on that logic, the more off sales there are, the more crime figures will fall.
With respect, I thought you told us that you had off sales since 2010.
We have. But if you allowed them
crime
for all
rates
the
didn't
other...
come down in 2010, 2011. They only came down last year, where almost every premises didn't
hang on,
have off
okay,
sales in the tens.
193, 192, and 131 is what you said. So 193 is more than 192, which is more than 131. So it's 3 years of falls. So if by us having off sales, the crime figures come down, the more off sales you give people, the more the crime figures will fall by a logical deduction.
As I hoped I'd made clear previously, the Camelford Arms was the outlier last year in having off sales in its 10. Every other premises did not. And I pointed that out at the very beginning of my submissions.
But hang on a minute. This relates to a very important point here, which Councillor Parrott actually picked up when she asked for the per capita, which the police were not able to give. The number of people in the Kemp Town area, let's forget the fact that your figures 193, 192, 131 are for a massive swathe of the city. It's not, we're talking about Kemp Town. People simply do not buy a drink in Kemp Town and go all the way to Preston Park to drink it. It doesn't happen. So what we must accept is the number of people in the Kemp Town area last year at Pride, the Pride Party, or whatever it's called these days, was considerably lower than previous years. If there are considerably less people in the area, it's probably not a hop and a skip to work out there's going to be considerably less crime committed. And isn't that the reason why the crime figures fell? It's just a numbers game.
First of all,
You're the ones making great thing about these crime figures coming down, but they come down anyway because there's less people.
Yeah.
Can I make an observation? Because you've made great. The police are making
Can
great.
I answer the first one first, or do you want me to wait and answer both at once?
Well, I'd like
Tony, you go, and then Edward answer.
Right. Let me just make this point. You've made great. The police have made great play about how the crime figures have fallen by a third from 24 to 25 over the Pride weekend, and it's all because of this clampdown on off sales. The comparison of figures provided by Mark between 24 and 25, if you look at the mid-August weekend, the amount of crime has increased by 40%. Well, I'm guessing there were no changes to off sales over a mid-August weekend. So if crime went up by 40% for that weekend, how is the reduction of a third all because of reduction of off sales over the Pride weekend? If it's swung down by a third because of what you've done, why has it gone up by 40% by something that you haven't done? You know, I don't follow this. Perhaps you could explain my question.
First of all, in answer to the Kemp Town related point that was made, I have no data, and I don't suppose Mark does either, on where all the people who were in Kemp Town for the Pride event were staying.
What's that got to do with it?
Well, if they were on their way to where they were staying after the Pride event, and that's where the crime happened, then your point is completely invalid. Secondly, I know that the footprint was geographically reduced last year. I don't know that the numbers were reduced. That's something perhaps Mr. Thorogood could help with, and if he can't, then perhaps you could give us the source for your figures.
By standing on the street and being stood on that street for 16 years over that weekend, I know what full looks like.
By our conversations with the chair of the Pride CIC, who confirmed to us that the figures for the Pride Party were substantially down last year.
Terrific.
That's our evidence.
Right now, thirdly, in answer to Mr. Groom's question, that's not what we said, and that's not our position.
Sorry, in answer to the question, you're making a big thing about crime being reduced by a third because of the off sales, because of your big clampdown on off sales, but why did crime increase by 40% in the middle of August?
I don't know how many 10s there were applied for there and how many of those 10s included off sales. So it could be there's no basis for the question. I don't have the
So you don't have the evidence.
Can I ask Mark, I mean, do you have any idea of the numbers change between 24 and 25 in terms of
No, I mean, as we've
street party?
No, I mean, as we stated already, we've given you a broad amount of crime figures for the area of central Brighton over the course of Pride, the August bank holiday, and the middle August weekend, to just give you a comparison of how, you know, during the Pride weekend, the crime does increase over the other two weekends of that month. And then what it also has demonstrated that the crime did come down in 2025. But at the end of the day, as I say, you know, we've said it many a times, this is about public safety, people going on the beach and drinking. And, you know, regardless of what the crime figures are. If we can stop off sales and reduce, one extra person coming to harm on the beach, then we're going to try and do it. And that's, why we're here today.
Okay, that's understood. Are we in a position to move to your substantive representation, Mr. Groom, Mr. McKinnon-Musson, or do you have any further questions for the police?
I think we're ready to move forward now.
Okay, let me just sort of check I've got everything right here. Hang on. So, yeah, all right. I think, yeah, so it's your go for your substantive representation, please. Go for it.
Okay, I'm going to open the comments. So, good afternoon, everyone. I am the head of legal for the wider group of companies, which includes Robel Leisure, the operator of the Campbellford Arms. I just want to make a point about the head of legal title. Head of legal means I am responsible for dealing with the legal affairs of our businesses. Our businesses are very diverse. They do include licensing, events and hospitality, etc. They also include a wide range of matters. I would say I would categorize myself as a generalist. If there is any legal issue that comes our way, it lands on my desk for me to deal with. I am certainly not a specialist in this position, or in any specific area. Having said that, I would like to take a few moments to summarize the law that is in issue here and how the law applies to the specifics of our case and our hearing today. In doing so, I am very conscious that I am addressing a panel of the licensing committee, and that you will be familiar with how the licensing law, licensing law. However, as it is so very rare for a TEN application to go to a hearing, I would just like to emphasise the legal aspects of TENs, which are particularly pertinent to today's hearing. Now, as you know, obviously, the law is set out in statute, statutory guidance, case law, and the Council's own statement of licensing policy. The law is very clear. It is intended to be a light touch process. Each application must be judged on its own merits. It must relate only to the TEN as submitted based on its individual characteristics and not as part of a wider citywide event. It must be evidence-based and, the onus is on the police to show a clear and compelling evidence why the TEN should not be granted. I'm going to explore these and develop these a little bit further. Taking these in turn, this is a light touch process. The purpose of the TEN legislation is to provide a light touch process by which there can be occasional changes to the way venues operate their licenses on a temporary basis only. Objections can only be raised by the two regulatory bodies, Environmental Health and the police. There are 4 specific grounds for objection based only on the licensing objectives: public order, public nuisance, crime disorder, prevention of harm to children. This is a light touch process, but of course the Licensing Act restrictions about being responsible people and operating correctly continue to apply. Nothing compromises on the 4 licensing objectives. This light touch process gives a limited timescale on which these objections can be raised, 72 hours. If necessary, and a hearing needs to be held, with very limited exceptions, these need to be held within 2 weeks of the application. Following Freedom of Information Act requests to the Council, we have established that last year there were 731 TENs applied for in Brighton. This is the only one of those TENs that has required a hearing. Now, we understand there was a TEN hearing this week for an earlier venue, but that was applied for in 2026, not 2025. Our application was made over 10 months ago. It was postponed to allow the relevant parties to review the operation of Pride 2025. We understand that this review was completed in December last year, when this hearing was originally planned to be held. The Council's environmental health team initially objected on 3 of the grounds: crime disorder, public nuisance, and public safety, but not, importantly, protection of harm to children, where they had no issue. But given the time to reflect afforded by the postponement of this hearing, environmental health have withdrawn their objection in its entirety. If environmental health don't have a problem with our TEN, then this does undermine the credibility of the police's position, especially as a team of 6 officers from the police and environmental health turned up as part of a standard visit to the Camelford Arms in a joint visit in the early hours of Pride Sunday morning, and I personally engaged with all of them to identify if they had a problem and whether they wished us to change anything. Both the police and environmental health confirmed to me personally there and then in a real-time situation that they had no concerns with what they were seeing, and they left together satisfied with how our 10 was operating. The only outstanding objection is from the police. Next bit, particularly relevant here, each application is to be judged on its own merits. The application must relate only to the 10 as submitted based on its individual circumstances and not as part of a wider citywide event. The statutory guidance is so clear here. Paragraph 117. Each application must be considered on its own merits and in accordance with the licensing authority's statement of licensing policy. Conditions attached to licenses and certificates must be tailored to the individual type, location and characteristics of the premises and the events concerned. It is essential to avoid the imposition of disproportionate and overly burdensome conditions on premises where there is no need for such conditions. Standardized conditions should be avoided and indeed may be unlawful if they cannot be shown to be appropriate for the promotion of licensing objectives in an individual case. All of that above is just has been quoted word for word from the statutory guidance. The guidance is very clear. It cannot take into account wider events across the city. Legally, it must only relate specifically to the Camelford Arms and nothing else. The police's position, the police's position is we have to look at an event from a wider perspective as a citywide event. Yes, from a policing perspective, that is, of course, true. We all know that the Pride weekend is extremely busy and lively. Of course, there are tens of thousands, at least, of extra visitors to the town, putting extra demands on everyone's resources. But Pride is the jewel in the crown of the Brighton calendar. It fills our hotels with enthusiasm and colour and money. It is key to the economy of our tourism, which is in everyone's interest to promote. Promotion of tourism is a council priority and one we wholeheartedly support. If we want jobs in this town, we have to make this place as attractive as possible so that people want to come here. Pride weekend should not be seen as a headache for everyone. It should not be viewed as a problem to be endured. It is our most important opportunity of the year for our town to show itself off to the country and beyond. Now, more than ever, with businesses really struggling in hospitality and leisure, we need to fully capitalise on this wonderful opportunity to show the world what Brighton stands for. And if such an exceptional weekend requires a bit of extra planning, then so be it. That is our jobs for all of us. And it's easy to forget, but Pride weekend is a lot of fun. So the police have many powers developed over many years by which they can plan and dynamically adjust their plans to cope with the expected and the unexpected. It is a demanding time for them as it is for everyone else involved in the weekend. But the law does not allow the police to use the Licensing Act to control a wider city event. They have so many powers at their disposal to ensure this is a safe environment for everyone, but Part 5 of the Licensing Act 2003 is not one of those powers. It only concerns how a 10 operates to the specifics of a specific event at a specific venue, i.e. only at the Camelford Arms and not Pride generally, based on real-time evidence and not based on speculation and conjecture. That is the law on its own merits. The police are saying we must have the same conditions for everyone, a point reconfirmed in the hearing today. Yet the law is very clear. When it comes to TENS, they cannot have a policy of imposing the same conditions. They must have conditions that are tailored to the specifics of each event and cannot have a blanket policy. It's there in the guidance. As soon as the police say we are treating everyone the same, they are admitting to doing something the law does not allow. They are asking the council to do something the council legally cannot do. Under the law of TENS, the law is very clear. The police cannot take wider events into account. They must consider each individual application on its own merits and only insofar as it relates to specific events and specific venues. It must take into account the venue's characteristics. It must be evidence and cannot rely on conjecture or speculation. The above describes the law anywhere in the country. In Brighton, however, because it has adopted its innovative good operator approach to reward and incentivize good operators across the city, then there is a legal presumption that a TEN will be granted unless there is clear and compelling evidence. The burden of proof lies with the police to present this evidence. No evidence has been provided because there is none. We have done nothing wrong. At our meeting with the police on the 8th of May, they confirmed we are good operators. We have an unblemished record over 16 years across 4 venues in Brighton and Hove. Proxy sales, which has always been the big issue that been raised, proxy sales has never been raised as an issue with us or in any Pride feedback meeting in any of the last 16 years at least. We say 16 because that's how long we've been involved. The only concern of the police has been relating to proxy sales until today when the goalposts have moved, and only during the extended hours deep into the morning. The police were fully supportive of our application for extended trading hours. They have no concerns with how we have operated every Pride or otherwise since we began trading in 2010, and they have no evidence as to any issue with us and proxy sales. We debated all of the legal issues, and at the end of our meeting, Sergeant Mark Rothbone concluded, "You have made a very compelling case. I need to take this up with the commander." Nothing at all has changed since we made that strong and compelling case 4 weeks ago, and yet here we are today. The evidential requirement. The police must provide clear and compelling evidence that proxy sales pose a real evidence-based risk on the specific operation of the Camelford Arms over the years. They have provided no such evidence because there has not been a problem. By contrast, we have full evidence of running 16 Prides without any drama, any problem, or any complaint. During every one of those 16 Prides, both myself and Alistair have personally been in attendance until closing on every Friday, every Saturday, and every Sunday of every Pride since 2010. This is our evidence. As soon as we were aware that proxy sales were an issue, we raised a Freedom of Information Act request with the police to ask how many people have been cautioned, charged, arrested, or convicted of proxy sales in the Pride Village footprint in each of the last 4 years. The answer is none. Importantly, the FOI request shows that the police do keep detailed records. Here are the 15 arrest codes that were searched as part of our FOI request. They show nil. So the police, who must supply clear and compelling evidence that proxy sales is and has been a problem at the Camelford Arms, they raised this as their formal objection, even though they knew this was not the case, based on the crime records they keep on their files, but they never offered up these critical facts. Thankfully, we have the Freedom of Information Act law. I will add that we also submitted a further FOI request to identify how many people were cautioned, charged, arrested or convicted of proxy sales across the citywide event of Brighton Festival in each of the last 4 years. This was for comparison purposes. This was a much easier request for the police to answer. However, whereas our first FOI request was answered within 10 working days, the police have now said they need at least 40 days, twice the legal maximum, to answer this request, even though they are aware of this hearing taking place today and I wish to present this as evidence. They have offered no explanation or apology for this delay. This sets out our legal position, which of course is all that we can consider today. We have focused in providing our evidence on proxy sales because proxy sales is what we have been told is the problem. If we hadn't been told it was about proxy sales, we wouldn't have made those FOI requests. And proxy sales, since the police are aware that we have this evidence to say that proxy sales have not been an issue, then we're suddenly talking about wider off sales, not proxy sales. To summarise, the law requires clear and compelling evidence that our specific venue, the Camelford Arms, will undermine the licensing objectives of crime and disorder and prevention of harm to children with R10, even if it's to operate in exactly the same way as we have for 16 years without any complaint, bearing in mind that the Freedom of Information Act proves that proxy sales has never been a problem. Without this clear and compelling evidence, the council cannot lawfully uphold this objection. This is the law. And I will now pass over to Alistair to provide evidence for our good operator activity over the last 16 years across our town, and we will happily answer any queries you may have. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. I mean, to make the point, Tony and I run the Camelford Arms for Pride. We're there for virtually all of the opening hours that we operate for over Pride, and we have done that for the last 16 years. It's exhausting. I understand that, as it is for the police to police the event. But what I can't get my head around is why we are here. What's so different for 2026 that is stand out from 2010 onwards, where we have had the same, pretty much the same temporary event notice for all those years. And certainly the one that we applied for now that we're discussing is exactly the same, except the dates changed, that we had in 2025 when there was no problem that relates to the Camelford Arms. And that is, I keep coming back to this. This is not about the general pride numbers, how many arrests there are. All evidence has to trace back to the door of the Camelford Arms. And to say that you can't prove that an off sale didn't cause harm, when we have off sales, what happens is that a group of people, customers, mainly, I have to say, much older guys, because that's our market. So we're talking about people 40, 50, 60 upwards. They congregate and stand outside in the road, as do quite a lot of our neighbours, because it's a residential street, and they enjoy a drink outside a pub on a big night of the year, or a couple of big nights of the year. They don't wander away, actually. And how do we know that? Because we've got 3 security staff, we've got 3 doors, there's one on each door, and one door we tend to take we take out of use, really, and the other, so we've got 2 security doors staff on each of the outer doors, and we have 1 floater guy who is amongst the crowd. And we're not talking about thousands of people at that time of the night. There might be 40 people, I guess, 50 people maybe, but they don't wander away. They when they do wander away, it's to go home. And if we look at these off sales that the police are objecting to, are the off sales made in the wee small hours. Well, if we do make an off sale in the wee small hours, it's to somebody who wants to go and stand in front of the pub and drink and consume their drink. They're not buying to rush off. And if there is an off sale issue, it probably comes back to supermarket bought alcohol, which is a fraction of the cost of the alcohol we sell, particularly at Pride, which is not cheap. So I really can't quite understand what is so special about the 2026 temporary event notice application that is standout when we've done it the same way for 16 years. So I don't get that. It must be standout because out of the from the 700 plus temporary event notices that have been applied for in last year in 25, there's only one that's come to a hearing, and that's ours. So I can't see why that would be, unless there is an aggregation here of the police trying to control the wider event by blanketing all off sales and saying no to them, which is not the law, as Tony has established. You know, you can't just go all blanket and say you can't have off sales and then not say, well, the supermarkets can't have off sales either, and the off licenses can't have off sales either. You know, that's not a level playing field for a start. And most of the trouble of people drinking on the beach will not be alcohol bought in our pub, and it has to come back to our pub. In fact, none, I would say, comes back to our pub because it's just not happening. And the age group we're talking about do not go to the beach after they've had a drink at our place, whether it's an on sale or an off sale. I think what it is the police are pretty scared that if everybody applies for off sales, they want to make us a standout, because if everyone applies for off sales, then they might have a problem. I don't know, but you can't lay that at the Camelford Arms door. It isn't what the law is designed to do. It's all about, are we good operators? Yes, we are. There was Mr. Elton tried to say that the standard of licensing practice doesn't apply to tens. Well, when I read yesterday, I think it was, the panel's findings on another pub in Brighton regarding a Pride temporary event notice, they did actually draw a parallel between a good operator. They said, we think you're a good operator. If I remember that correctly. So they have drawn a parallel already between their standard of licensing policy and the temporary event process. I may add that we helped out in defining, we did our bit in defining the standard, the new standard of licensing practice. We went to various sessions where our opinion was sought on what it should look like, and it's a very good thing. It's great. It really is. So we did our bit there, and here's the first time essentially that standard of licensing policy is being tested. So is it going to fall at the first hurdle? Well, that will make a mockery of the standard in forever, if that's what's going to happen here. And if the standard of licensing policy is applied, then the panel can't not give us our 10 because we tick all the boxes. There's a presumption in favour. There has to be a very high hurdle has to be achieved before the application will be thrown out, and we're nowhere near that level because there is no evidence of a problem tracing back to the door of my business, and that's what has to happen here. It's quite clear there is no evidence. No evidence has been put forward because there isn't any evidence. We're great operators, as we have been from all our venues in Brighton, and you know, I'm passionate about this. Why should we not have what we've had for 16 years? There's no logic to it. We haven't done anything wrong. There isn't a vast people queuing around the block to launch complaints on any of the grounds of the licensing objectives at all. So there's no evidence against us. we are a good operator under the standard statement of licensing policy, and therefore I can't see why we would be denied. I can't understand why we are in this hearing. And you can't aggregate. You can't just accumulate and aggregate. Oh, well, you know, we're a standout, we're an outlier, and all the rest of it. This hearing is to consider why our 10 for 2026 should not be granted. And I can't see there is any evidence or a reason that comes to specific door of the Camelford Arms. And that's what the law requires.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Thanks very much for your reps. I just want to pick up on one point, which I think both of you just mentioned, the element in the statement of licensing policy that provides for a presumption that a temporary event notice will be granted under the good operator policy. I think that was discussed and clarified earlier, that that's not quite as you set out. It's that under the good operator policy, variations are more likely to be provided and not temporary event notices. So that's a subtle but important difference, I think.
The policy does talk about application to vary the hours, and if a temporary event notice when we're looking to vary the hours, so that is why we would say this does fall within the good operator policy. But the key point to all of this is all about the evidence, and even if we didn't have the good operator policy, the police, that any 10 must be based around the evidence. And as we've already established, the police have provided no evidence other than there was a 30% reduction of crime across the whole of the area. And we had and that is somehow related to the Camelford Arms and the officers. There is no causal link. There is no evidence that they have provided. That is the law, irrespective of the statement of licensing policy. We are very strongly of the view the statement of licensing applies. That provides a higher evidential burden, but which clearly has not been satisfied. But the basic level, it must be evidence-based. That has not been satisfied either. You can only make a decision that the law is very clear. It must be based on the evidence. It's the case law. It's very, it cannot be related to conjecture and speculation. That is the very clear position, and there is no evidence here. So irrespective of the statement of licensing policy, the evidence is still required, and there is none.
Thank you. That's clear.
I would just pick up, Councillor Sykes, that in the findings of the hearing, which I think was earlier this week, regarding a pub in Kemptown, a neighbouring pub in Kemptown, there was in that written finding, there was the statement of licensing policy 2026 was mentioned in relation to the 10 that pub had applied for, and I think it said that, you know, under the SOLP, you considered the operators of that pub to be good operators. So there is some grey area, I would suggest, where the licensing panel on that occasion did draw a parallel between the operators of the venue who were applying for the 10, which you granted actually, and the standard of licensing, the statement of licensing policy. So
we do think the statement of licensing. We do think statement of licensing policy is an innovative idea. We think it is very much to be welcomed. It reduces the need to spend 2 hours at a 10 hearing to talk about, can we carry on doing what we've been doing without problem for the last 16 years without problem. It's innovative. It has been highly regarded around the country in the licensing area. This is the first test of that policy, and it is there to incentivize and reward good operators. And if we're now going to say, oh, well, it doesn't apply here because there's a legal loophole, then it's going to fall flat on its face at the first hurdle. And I'm sure that's not what anybody
understood. Can I please? I'd like to move on. I understand. I've got you.
I was going to talk about it's the spirit of it as much as the legality of it.
absolutely. Okay, Rebecca, are you going to say each on its own merits?
Well, I'm going to say that the good operator policy doesn't strictly apply to TENs. I don't think it does. It applies to variations usually, but that's not to say that the spirit of the good operator policy, as you say, isn't relevant. I mean, it is relevant that someone is a good operator, but it doesn't create a presumption of grant in favour of a 10. But it is highly relevant to, to your case, and it was possibly relevant to the other case that you refer to, but it wasn't a presumption of grant under the policy, because that's mainly aimed at varying a premises license that's already in existence, not a 10. I mean, I think that is the case.
Okay,
Rebecca, can I just ask a question, Rebecca, please? Which is, isn't a 10 just a temporary varying of a license? Technically,
no, I think. Well, I mean,
Rebecca, it's
we
not under
it.
the Act. I mean, it isn't under the Act, and I think it's under the 3.5.1. I mean, there was a presumption to vary applications beyond the matrix approach. I mean, that was the kind of issue in the licensing policy, that a good operator might be able to apply to vary beyond the matrix approach, and that matrix doesn't apply to 10s in any way. So it's about varying, but I take your point totally. It is relevant that you're a good operator. I mean, that's
even irrespective of the statement of licensing policy and the good operator, even if that doesn't apply, which just park that for current purposes, even if it doesn't apply, the basic law is this must be evidence based, and there is no evidence provided.
Yep, you've made that point, Tony. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we're at the point in the agenda where the applicants made their representation. We're going to questions from the panel. I raised an initial question. Any other questions from Councillor Nan or Councillor Parrott?
No, thank you, Chair.
Right, Sam.
No, thank you. Not at this point.
All right. Okay. Any questions from the police for the applicant?
You'll all be very pleased to hear not many. First question is this. Given that you'll be the only premises making off sales in the hours beyond 3 or 4 in the morning for the Saturday and Sunday nights of the Pride event across Brighton and Hove, what steps have you taken to deal with the increasing numbers from the magnet effect of being the only premises making off sales in the Brighton and Hove area for those nights? For instance, in terms of intoxicated people, in terms of under 18s, and in terms of noisy revellers.
Can I address this point directly? Because I think it is very, very important to get some sort of context as to what Camelford Street is like in the early hours of these mornings. Because the impression that has been created by the discussion so far is that this is some wild, crazy party that is going on till sunrise. Okay. The hours that we have applied for are for the maximum hours that we think we need to apply for this. Last year on the Friday night, we had the temporary event notice gave us the right to go through till about 3 o'clock. The Friday night, most people had drifted home by about 1:15 because they had a big party day the next day. They didn't want to go forward. They went home. Even on the Saturday night, the street was pretty much empty at 2:30 in the morning because people had had their fill of the day. They'd had a lovely day. They were looking forward to enjoying the next day, and they disappeared off home. And on the Sunday night, there were 3 or 4 people standing in the street at midnight, and we said, "Why don't you come inside? There's more of a life inside the pub. Come inside," which they did. We don't have loud music playing outside in our venue. We've always had this, whereas in the past, music sets were set up all around outside the other venues. For all of the time, we have never had music systems in our street because we look upon it as being a bit of a quiet area. It's a residential street. We have our neighbours. We love our neighbours. Our neighbours don't have a problem with us because we look after them. The crowd that do appear during the evening, it's a very pleasant crowd. It's an older crowd. I would say the average age is probably well into the 50s. It's a market that is not particularly catered for outside of our venue across the environment. They stand there, they talk, they have a laugh, they enjoy each other's company, they make new friends. They're not dancing away. It's not lying loud and crazy, and the crowd gently disappear. I cannot remember seeing anybody under the age of 20 in the streets. You know, it is not that type of crowd. That crowd goes to all the other venues, and they're very welcome to do so. You know, we know what our market is, and our market know what we are, and that's why they come to us. So all this idea of what steps are we doing to control the wild crowd of teenagers standing around trying to get old people to buy them drinks so they can go and take them onto the beach is utter detached from reality. It is not what is happening here. We are a gentle pub. We have a gentle crowd. We have a good experience. We offer a different part to what is available and provided for by the other venues across the whole of the Pride weekend. It is why people come to us. We have a lot of people say, we come to Pride, we love Pride, and we only ever come to your venue, and we're here the Friday night, the Saturday night, and the Sunday night because we like it so much. It is catering in a diverse way to a different part of the crowd, and it is well behaved. Hence, there is no problem at all, and never has been for 16 years. So we don't have to say what measures do we have to put in place to do with a rowdy crowd, because it is not a rowdy crowd.
And to your point, your specific point, Mr. Elton, if we were, you use the inflammatory word magnet. We're a magnet for crowds that will come to us for a final drink. It didn't happen last year, so there's no evidence that it's going to happen this year. And conjecture, we've already said, isn't a ground.
It must be evidence. This is our evidence, and our evidence, we are personally attesting to this, because me and Alistair have, for every Friday, every Saturday, every Sunday night of every Pride since 2010, we have been in our venue or out on the street until the venue closes, when we then help with the clear down, etc. And we might go home as the sun is rising, exhausted. But that is not to say our customers are doing that, because our customers have gone hours before that. So that is our evidence. Where is the police's evidence that there is any problem?
My next question is, do you agree? Oh, I do apologise, Councillor. It's one more question area. I think it's 3 short questions, and then I'll be finished. Do you agree that you don't allow under 18s inside the Camelford Arms?
Correct.
Absolutely not. It's a condition of our licence that they're not allowed to come in at any time. Every time we take a booking for anything to do with, you know, for when people are trying to book for Sunday lunch, we always ask them, you know, are there anyone under the age of 18? We are not allowed to have 18. We have turned parties away when people are having their 18th birthday party, but they're not actually 18 until the next day. And we have to turn that booking away because they are not 18. It is a very strict condition of our licence. It is something which we don't particularly want, but we apply for it. We lose business because of it. But absolutely, there has never been anybody any incidents of anybody under the age of 18 being in our venue. It is something which we are very, very strict about, because it is a term of our licence. It is the term and conditions upon which we're allowed to operate, and we fully respect that.
So you agree then that there is a 0% chance of proxy sales in terms of on sales, because there can't be any 18-year-olds inside?
By your own definition, yes.
Yes,
thank you.
But that's not what we're talking about.
Finally this. So you agree that the only way the Camelford Arms could be involved, wittingly or unwittingly, in proxy sales is off sales?
That would apply, but proxy sales hasn't been an issue as the police.
Very clever, but the same point. A Martian isn't going to buy drinks either, and it's the same logic. And we're talking about a small, controllable group of people who want to have a beer after they've come away from whatever, outside an English pub, a pint in hand. That doesn't seem to me to suggest there is an extrapolation to they're going to run around the corner and give it to a child, because they just buy their drink in plastic, in a plastic pint glass, stand in front of the pub, chat amongst themselves and drink it. And we observe them doing it. We've got 3 security staff in front of the building for that purpose, including, in addition, Tony and myself. So you've got probably 30 or 40 people being controlled by 5. Tony, myself, and 3 security. The idea that they could or would or do or might go around the corner and give a drink to a child is just utter rubbish.
And
in the same way as a Martian could be given a drink by one of my customers. It just doesn't happen.
Critically, we're getting drawn into this thing about, oh, the big problem is proxy sales, yet the Freedom of Information Act revealed, which the police did not volunteer, that there is no issue of proxy sales, and there never has been in the last 4 years in Pride. So to have all of this discussion about how we are prepared or willing and letting our customers to give drinks to teenagers, etc., is just complete fiction. It is a distraction. And it is something which we take great offence with, because this idea that somehow we are irresponsible operators who are letting children get plied with alcohol by old men is quite frankly offensive. And you've got no evidence to back it up. In fact, you've got plenty of evidence that this is not a problem, and the police withheld that.
Okay. I'm going to draw a line under that. Thank you very much. The question's been put and the answer was given. So any further questions from Mr. Allen or Mr. Thorogood for the applicant?
None, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, we're now moving to summaries, and I'd appreciate Rebecca.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of explore or clarify this off sales operation at your premises. Then I mean, arguably, you don't need off sales then to sell alcohol in unsealed containers for people to drink out on the street. I don't know. You're not saying.
Well, we do, Rebecca, because people like to stand outside our venue. That's what they've done for years. In the same way as they stand outside English pubs up and down the land. But they want to be out in the fresh air. Say again?
I don't know. You don't need off sales for that, do you? I mean,
yes. Because they're consuming, they're buying it and they're consuming the alcohol away from the premises, in the street, in other words.
But I mean, technically, consumption isn't a license. But I mean, your idea of off sales is purely for people to consume it in the street within your visibility outside the pub. You're not selling. Do you sell it in sealed containers to take?
No, not at all. Absolutely not.
So you sell it in unsealed containers.
Yeah, they come and they get the same pint glass, the plastic glass, a plastic slippy glass thing that we've all had wherever event we go to. They get served in that and they go outside and drink it.
They stand about 10 yards away from.
We don't sell off sales in the way that an off license would. It's a pint in a plastic pint glass, and they walk outside and consume it in the street in front. They
will be drinking
with their friends.
They'll be drinking within 10 feet of our bar. They'll just be outside in the street, outside our pub.
And that will be governed. That will be overseen and supervised by your door staff.
Yeah, and Tony and I as well, because we mingle amongst the crowd all the time to see if there's any problem. I go between the bar area and the outside frequently, like all the time. I'm constantly moving, and you see people out in the street. They come and buy another drink. They go back, and they're stood in little groups around our pub having a beer, which they've done that way forever. It's a
lovely way. It's a lovely, pleasant way to spend a summer evening. It's not a wild party in our place. It's old people having a nice drink.
We do not.
Rebecca, does that answer your question?
I don't think we've ever, Rebecca, been asked, "Can I buy a bottle of wine and take it away?" Because we wouldn't do it, and if they did want to do that, we would decant the bottle into an open glass or serve it by six plastic cups or something. But it's not something that they can. You're talking about liquid in a plastic cup. They can't go down to the beach with it or anywhere very far because it will slop over and they'll end up with nothing. So if they want that sort of thing, they'll go to the 24/7 off licenses that are around and buy it there and go to the beach and whatever happens there, but they won't be buying it from us. We're just selling pints for people to stand in front of the pub and drink from, and that's basically what it's all about.
And does that not, yes, and arguably you possibly don't need off sales to do that, but that's a moot point, and so we won't necessarily, but and that doesn't, the police, that doesn't in any way reduce the police concerns, does it?
They're taking the alcohol away from our license area, and our license area does not include the street. So
Okay,
that
Paul,
is why.
can I jump in?
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, you're on mute, Paul.
Sorry, I can't hear.
So, excuse me. I think interestingly, Alistair literally answered the question I was about to ask as with his last breath there. So this isn't about in principle, this isn't about the right to sell alcohol for people to take away. You're literally looking to be able to have people drinking alcohol next to your pub.
Correct.
Yes,
absolutely. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, for technical reasons, they are taking it outside of our licensed premises, and that's why it's an off sale. But they are taking it 10 feet away. They're not wandering around to the beach or anything like that.
And thank you. And Rebecca, you said that point was moot. Why is that point moot? Why does it?
Oh, just because consumption of alcohol isn't a licensable activity, so it's arguable, possibly, although that isn't necessarily an off sale. But I take your point to be on the safe side. I mean, I don't know if you have a tables and chairs license at some point. Probably not. In that,
we haven't got any, the pavement in front of us. We can't even have an A board.
No,
it's too narrow. It's too narrow a pavement. So no, we don't have any tables and chairs.
But I mean, I think the point is that I don't understand the police concern to be people drinking 10 feet away from your premises. I don't know, and the police concern is people taking it further afield, and you're saying you won't be allowing that.
They don't. They simply don't. They buy. I mean, no one's going to really walk that far with what you're aware of those slippy glasses that if you pinch them too much, all the liquid comes straight out the top. Those are the kind of receptacles that we sell in over Pride, like everyone does. Well, people don't walk for miles and miles and miles with that kind of setup. You know, if you bought alcohol in a closed bottle, or a bottle with a cork in it, or something like that, or a screwed top, then you might go further afield and you might take it to the beach. You might also take it to Preston Park, but you don't get very far with a pint, a plastic, one of those squidgy things, a disposable plastic cup.
I think that's understood. I think that's understood.
Can I just sort of to emphasise about how our venue works and how the police and the council have not had a problem without the venue and the street outside works. I did mention in my earlier comments that there was a joint visit by the police and the council on the Saturday night, Sunday morning. The 6 officers came along, and I recognised them obviously because of the police, but I also recognise environmental health because of our dealings with them before over the many years. And I approached them and said, "Oh, can I just check? You know, are you here?" They're just doing a regular standard visit, and I said, "Is there anything that is here that you don't like? Is there anything here that you want us to change?" And they said that in a joint visit that they were all happy, comfortable. It was being very well managed, and they actually complimented us on it is a lovely atmosphere here. And that was in the early hours, just before, probably at the venue's peak, and it started to drift away from that. So if 6 officers from the police and environmental health both say to me, when I was asking, I approached them, I asked them, is there anything here you'd want to change? And they're complimenting us on how it is operating. They had no concerns then, and all of this concern about proxy sale, the first we ever heard of this was in April this year, and following an email that the police sent in February, where they said the primary concern is proxy sales.
Okay.
Not off sales, but specifically proxy sales. So that's why we're so passionate about this. We operate a good venue on the Pride weekend, and another part of the statement of licensing policy, it is all about, it does say they're looking to encourage a mixed age group in the hospitality and in the leisure scene. Well, we are the place where particularly men of a particular age, will come to us because it is a facility that is not afforded by anyone else. They want to stand in the street. There's never been a problem. The neighbours have never complained about the noise. The neighbours are often part of the party. And we've done this for 16 years, so why we have to change now? That's our concern.
Got you. Thank you, Tony. Yeah. Right. We've been going for 2 hours and a bit. I was gonna sort of adjourn for a few minutes if anyone needed that. But we're now close to the end of the panel. So if it's all right with everybody, we'll now proceed to summaries. Are we okay to just carry straight on?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we'll go for summaries, please. First of all, from the licensing officer, then from the police, then from the applicant. And as we've had a great deal of discussion and toing and froing, I'd appreciate if the summaries were kept brief. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, Sarah. Yeah,
Thank you. Yeah, I'll keep it very brief. In accordance with Section 105 of the Licensing Act, where an objection notice is given by the Environmental Health Team or the police, the licensing authority must hold a hearing. You have heard from all the relevant parties present regarding the 10 notification today. The licensing authority must have regard to the objection notice, either decide to allow the licensable activities or give the premises user a counter notice if it considers it appropriate to do so for the promotion of the licensing objectives. It must give the premises user the counter notice together with a statement of the reason for its decision and give it to any other relevant person, in this instance, the police. If the licensing authority decides not to give a counter notice, it must provide the premises user and any other relevant person with a notice of the decision, and all these requirements must be met at least 24 hours before the beginning of the event specified in the 10. Thank you.
thank you very much, Sarah. Could we have the summary from the police, please?
The matter of law that sort of seemed to have arisen organically, a temporary event notice is not a sort of temporary variation of a premises license. It's a different part of the Act. It comes without the conditions that a license will have, and it is wholly dissimilar. Of course, one doesn't have to have a premises license in order to apply successfully for a 10. In fact, most 10s or many 10s are issued to organisations that don't have a premises license. So that's just to correct that suggestion on the law. To our 6 points, we're not objecting to the Camelford Arms carrying out its licensable activities in accordance with its licence. We haven't objected, we continue not to object to that. We're not objecting to everything in the 10. We're only objecting to the off sales and the off sales through the window bar. We're not seeking to control the Pride event. Those are words that I, on behalf of the police, have spoken for the first time, but it's about the 9th. I've been keeping a tally. 9th time those words have been spoken, only by the applicant in order to knock it down. But it's a paper tiger. We're not trying to control the Pride event at all. What we are trying to do is promote the 4 licensing objectives. We agree that the Camelford Arms has that good operator status. Absolutely agree that. It is right that there have been successful visits and all that sort of thing. That is some of the evidence. Some of the other evidence is that in the last 2 years, the instance of crime and misadventure on the beach and in the sea has dramatically risen, and the police are seeking to address that. And that's the basis for the objection. And it's entirely in keeping with the 4 licensing objectives. And I'd remind you, and this is absolutely fundamental to licensing, you're always acting proactively. Yes, there has to be evidence. There is evidence. There's been the increase of crime and misadventure on beach and sea. You always are acting proactively. You're not looking back. So it's not right that you must only decide based on things that have happened. You must only decide based on your appreciation of what best promotes the licensing objectives moving forward. In terms of the good operator policy, and you have Ms. Siddell, she has the policy, you have the policy. Paragraph 3.5.1 doesn't mention temporary event notices at all. It's simply not the bit of your policy that deals with TENs. And it is misstated by the applicant in their application to say that there's a presumption in favour. There simply isn't, not according to your policy. The application is in favour of the presumption is in favour of granting applications to vary premises licences, which are submitted by good operators as defined by the policy, including variations beyond those indicated by the matrix approach. Nothing about TENs there, and it's not even in the same section of your policy as TENs. TENs are dealt with not in section 3, they're dealt with in section 5. And applications, it says at 5.1, and Ms. Siddell will have this and can help you with any interpretation you might require. Applications for TENs at existing licensed premises will not be encouraged where the proposal is simply to extend the existing hours of operation. And that's what's being sought today. And certainly that's the bit we're objecting to that is being sought today. The applications made in the city safety area will be subject to increased scrutiny. And if the police believe that allowing the premises to be used in accordance with the 10 will undermine the licensing objectives, they must issue an objection notice. So rather than some power grab by the police, your own policy makes it abundantly clear we have a duty to make the objection that we've made. The police have noted that increase in crime and misadventure on the beach and sea, and they have concerns that that is linked to late night off sales, and it is only those off sales to which we're objecting. Not all off sales, not all late night drinking, just late night off sales. And since the police's aim and this panel's aim is to promote the 4 licensing objectives, and I set out that at much greater length, and I'm not going to repeat myself now, that includes the safety of people. And the point remains, the fundamental point remains, that whilst what has happened in the past has happened in the past, but what has changed of late is that spike in issues at the seaside. What has changed is that reduction when all of the other premises were not making off sales late at night, the reduction in crime across the days, and the fundamental problem remains that what might have happened in the past might happen again. It might not. But once an off sale is made, the premises has lost control of what happens to that alcohol, a splashy cup or not. And that is the basis for the police's objection to the off sales, not across the board, just in the new applied for hours after the usual hours and after the Pride event is finished each time for the day. So because there is that lack of control, because there's been the spike in issues, it's an entirely evidence-based decision looking forward in our respectful position, submission. It's an evidence-based proactive decision not to allow this 10 as sought. Unless I can assist you further, those are my submissions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Elson. And finally, can we go to the applicant for your summary, please?
Okay, I will start off our summary. Just to recap, this is intended to be a light touch process. It shouldn't take 10 months to do, and it doesn't need to involve specialist barristers. It must only relate to the 10 as submitted based on its individual circumstances and cannot be part of the wider citywide event. That is very clear. That is the statutory guidance. It must relate to the specific event and the specific premises. There are plenty of ways in which the police can operate and manage over the Pride weekend, but this part of the Licensing Act is not one of them. The objection must be evidence-based, and we've seen the evidence from the police is all over the place. There is no causal link. It is very, on the one hand, they say crime fell by 30% over Pride last year, but they're ignoring the fact that in the middle of August, the crime rate increased by 40% between those 2 years. So where has that got anything at all to do with off sales at the Camelford Arms? Because it's off sales at the Camelford Arms which must be and can only be the factor of issue here. We've described the what the atmosphere is like. It is not a magnet to attract people from all over town. I think if it's 3 o'clock in the morning on the Sunday morning, if somebody in deepest Hove fancies a drink, I'm sure they're not going to come all the way across to the Camelford Arms to buy a pint with us and then take it back to where it is they've come from. They will have sourced their alcohol long before that. So to link this crime around the wider part to our pub and our off sales at our pub is just not in grasp with reality. The people for the off sales, they stand within 10 or 15 yards of our pub, they talk to their friends, and they disappear long before these hours that we're looking for have finished. That is our experience based on 16 years of evidence. And all of this talk about proxy sales and are young teenagers going to be intoxicated by the older men standing outside our pub is inflammatory, it is provocative, it is ugly, and it is demeaning. And we resist this with a great passion. Okay, it is not a problem. There needs to be evidence to support the problem, and there is no evidence provided. That is our position. We've been doing this for 16 years. We've been doing it well for 16 years. And the answer seems to be just because you've been doing it for 16 years doesn't mean to say it's not going to work well in year 17. Therefore, we must step in and stop this. That is not what the 10 is about. There are plenty of ways the police can control what happens over Pride, over the Pride weekend. But this part of the licensing law is not one of those powers.
And picking up on that point, it does come back to slurpy drinks in squashy cups, actually. What we're seeking to do is have a small group of people, if they want to, and some of that is subject to the weather, because if it's raining, they won't want to be able to stand in front of our pub drinking their slurpy drink out of a squashy cup. They're not going to be taking that to the beach because it's too far and they'd have lost it all in the slurp of walking there. This idea that there's crime on the beach, there's no evidence been given of which bit of the beach this crime takes place. Is it the beach in front of Kemp Town, which is actually quite difficult to get to from Kemp Town, or is it between in front of the nightclubs that are further along the other side of the pier and between the piers? There's no mention of that, and therefore there is no direct link at all between us wanting our customers to finish their evening with a wet drink in a slurpy cup standing in front of their favourite pub. It's one might say it's an Englishman's right. It's what's been going on forever, in a similar way that we have the Morris dancers who dance in front of our pub just before Pride, and people stand outside in the street and have a slurpy drink. Watching that, it's no different. They stand in groups. There's no individuals. They're all within their little social groups, and they just want to have a beer in front of our pub, which we require an off sale to make that happen. The other thing about prevention of crime, prevention of this, prevention of that, it is absolutely true that during Pride, our customers are far more protected via off sales than they are at any other time of the year, because our bar does not require any SIA or security on the door at any time ever. We choose to put it in there at Pride because it's a big event and we want to manage it safely. We've always done that for the last 16 years. So during non-Pride times, people could quite easily buy a drink, take it anywhere they like, because there's nobody outside the venue. We don't have security in the street, which we do at Pride. We don't have Tony and I in the street, which we do at Pride, marshalling and checking and seeing and observing and watching what's going on. So if anything, there's more likely to be a problem from an off sale at a time other than Pride at the Camelford than there is at Pride, because it's far better supervised. Off sales are far better supervised during Pride than they are at any other time of the year, which is why there's never been a problem. And if there's never been a problem for 16 years, why shouldn't we just be able to do what we've done for 16 years without complaint, hindrance, or drama, why can't we just do it for the 17th year? Because we've got 16 years of doing it right, never been a problem. All we want to do is do the same as we've done before, and that seems to be it. As far as I'm concerned, we just want to do what we've done before and what our customers will want from us, because there are people who come to Brighton only once a year. They only come at Pride and they only come to the Camelford. I know that because they tell me, and they often end their evening, particularly on the Sunday, we'll see you next year. And we wish them good luck, good fortune, we wish them good health, and off they go into the night. And that's all they want to do, is that. It is a slurpy drink in a squidgy cup. That's all we want.
Okay, thank you very much, Alistair. Right, Rebecca, any points of legal advice before the panel withdraws?
Well, I don't think, I don't really want to, are there any points that you're unclear of that you want my advice on at this point? I mean, I don't think it's totally fair. I don't think it's totally fair to say you just ignore Pride. I mean, it is each application on its merits, and you are looking at this application for the Camelford Arms, but it is in the wider context of Pride across the city. I think that's, but I mean, I think, but you are looking at what they've applied for, and on a risk-based basis, and in the context of the police objection. But it should be, looked at in relation to the Camelford Arms primarily. I think that's a fair assessment, but Pride is also relevant as a wider background to the, no, I mean, other than that, I think, I think you've just got to go and make your decision now, really. And it'll be written up as soon as possible, hopefully within the next few days, I think.
Great. Okay. Right, we'll draw an end to the public panel. The panel will withdraw. We'll have Rebecca, our legal advisor, with us, and we'll have Sean, the clerk, to the panel with us. And as Rebecca said, we will deliberate on the basis of discussion, and we'll provide our conclusion in writing as soon as we can. I think, is that within 5 working days, Rebecca? Is that right? Or is
well,
it
it's not technically for a 10, but it's a bit unclear actually. But it's certainly we aim to do it. You have to deliberate now, make your decision now, and then it's communicated as soon as possible, and certainly well before the event. But So
okay, right. I'm going to close this panel now, and thanks very much to everybody for attending today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.